Hi, everyone. I'm Annemarie Schiavi Pedersen, and I'd like to thank Rochester writers and Michael Dwyer for allowing me to participate in the Shop Small Saturday weekend event. My novel, Celestina's Burnings, debuted earlier this year. It's a work of historical fiction with flashes of steamy romance, hunky stonecutters, brutal inquisitors, the Vatican, and witches performing their magic. I'd like to read a little passage for you today, and where I'm going to start is from the second half of the first scene, but I'm going to take a minute and now explain what happened just before that. The year we're in is 1491 Florence, Italy. When we meet Celestina, she's just finished a year-long period of mourning for her papa, who was killed trying to save a beautiful witch, a death that Celestina needs to avenge, but she doesn't exactly know how. Meanwhile, she's itching to begin her life. She dreams of finding and marrying a young sculptor, as she just wants to throw out her black dress of mourning and start fresh with something pretty and orange. Against her grandmother Simona's orders, Celestina has now just dashed out of the bakery, still in her depressing black dress, to check out the new riding on her street, the Via Scaglia. She runs through a cloud of bonfire smoke where she discovers another black dress burning on a stake. Right then, the cobblestones beneath her feet begin to shake. A holy army riding black stallions is charging down her street. Among the holy army, called the Reform, there is one who stands out, a cloaked religious figure, the only man riding a stallion of pure white. The district marshal introduces him as Fra Brucker, the vice supreme knight of the Reform, and says he's an Austrian. Celestina has never seen an Austrian and wonders if they're white as ghosts and if they all bear the jutting jaw of the Habsburgs. Celestina and the rest of the people on the street are told by the marshal to look down and bow their heads in respect. Okay, so now I'm going to begin reading from the book. The marshal tells the people they can raise their heads, and this is what Celestina sees. Fra Brucker had tugged back his hood to reveal a jaw that was square and refined. There was a pearly glow to his skin that contrasted with his hair, a mane so black it bore the tint of blue. Next to her, a pair of younger girls, skinny but bearing the hint of womanhood, giggled. It was about Fra's striking looks. Celestina glared at them until they shrank. After they acted sufficiently put in their places, she glanced at the replica of Donatello's bronze statue of David. It stood proud in front of the silk shop across the street. Now, if it were Donatello, the greatest sculptor of all time, sitting on Fra's white horse, she'd lose her morning biscotti. She'd even consider losing her modesty. But for a religious like Fra, no matter how bellow, she had no loving heart. Never. She could never feel for a man of God that way. Still, she had the sense his focus was on her. She glanced up and stifled a gasp. He was staring at her. Gray blue eyes under his lantern brow glowed like the hottest hue in a whisper of fire. It teetered at the edge of indecent. She looked fast at her feet. His attention made her ears burn. She counted 1, 2, 3, 9. Surely he'd be done looking. And 10. At 10, she looked up. His leer pinned her. She squirmed in her slippers. Did he never blink? She tipped her shoulder to create a barrier of coldness between them. A smart smile crossed his lips. Her rebuff was not as subtle as she supposed. He tapped his horse's neck twice, and the stallion stepped up and over like a bishop in a game of chess. She stumbled back a step, a pawn in retreat. He smirked, and then he faced the marshal. Now that his attention was off her, she dared to finally breathe. The Reform has chosen Florence, the most important city on the earth, to begin its mission to cleanse the world of witchcraft, the marshal proclaimed, and Frau Brucker will lead the fight. Oh, Celestina bounced on her toes. Never had she imagined there existed a holy army to save the people from the witches and to help her save Papa's soul. It was an answer to her prayers. Cheering voices bounced off the buildings. Faces beamed. The people were feeling the same way. She dared to peek at Fra, not with the hope that he'd look back, but to gauge his effect. She wanted to make certain that he understood that the people stood with him. But his face was as expressionless as a 1,000-year-old stone bust of a Roman Stoic. She scratched her head, and an Italian in a similar position would be prancing about on his horse while waving. But Fra's hand simply cradled the horn of his blue velvet saddle, and he dismounted. At full stretch, he was taller than any Italian she knew. His chin was higher than the withers of his horse. He looked to be about 23 or thereabouts, perhaps 5 years her senior. He rolled the cuff of his sleeve. Lead muscles on his arms twitched. She flipped a lock of her hair over her eyes and cast her gaze in the direction of the black dress burning on a stake in the street. But not a shadow remained. There wasn't a hint of leftover ash either. "What are you looking for, Fraulein?" asked Frau Brucker. The harsh sound of his voice was like a bristle brush scrubbing the inside of her ears. His eyes, a set of smoky sapphires, were calculating. "I'm waiting," he said, tapping his chin. "I seek the answer to why the dress burned." Celestina prayed no one noticed the tremor in her voice. But the people snickered. Her cheeks reddened. No one was safe from outright derision on the Via Scala. Fra's silence, however, dangled over her like a nun's threatening paddle. She stared at the ground, heart beating in her ear. "Look again," he said. She regarded where the black dress had been burning. A fresh black dress replaced the old one. She looked from side to side. The people, too, appeared astonished. "As you can see, there are no lack of witches or their dresses in Florence," said Fra. All nodded obediently. "So what do you think, Fraulein?" Celestina's head snapped around. Think? Thinking often brought trouble when it came to a religious. She preferred if he simply told her what to think, saved time and a punishing trip to the confessional. "Yes, think." Fra hiked up a silky eyebrow. "Do you have the stomach to be a witch hunter?" he asked. She was dizzy with the idea. "I didn't know such a formal opportunity existed for a woman, a humble baker such as myself," she said. "The Reform is a progressive movement of the people. A good woman is part of the people, yes? Do you have the will, Fraulein?" She swallowed hard. For Papa's soul, the answer was absolute. "I am ready," she said. She detected a bit of mischief in his smile. "Let's see if you can pass a little test," he said. She wiped her sweating hands against her dress. "What sort of test?" He sized up the hanging dress. "Do you have the fortitude to burn it?" The marshal then forced the handle of a burning torch into her hand. The powerful flame shook the grip. She needed 2 hands to hold on. Before anything went wrong, she touched the tip of the blaze to the hem. Whoosh! The dress erupted in an orange blaze. The very act of setting the dress aflame emboldened her. "With the power of this flame, I begin my journey to search, find, and destroy the witches of Florence. I swear this on the soul of my father, Alessandro di Capria." Her heart, which only this morning suffocated under a cloak of darkness, lightened with purpose. Before this day, she'd yearned for an orange dress to wear and a ragazzo with the shoulders of a sculptor to love. But the reform had now changed everything. She now had one mission: to capture 5 witches and burn their dresses. She could entertain no distractions. It would take all of her guile to succeed. The end, for now.
And welcome back to the second annual Rochester Writers, Rochester Hills Public Library Author Fair. It's our second annual for 2020, held virtually, as you can see. And for this segment, we are speaking with Annemarie Schiavi Pedersen. Annemarie, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, we just watched your video with your reading from your book. Remind us the title of the book and when it was released.
Okay, here's the book is Celestina's Burnings, and it debuted this year. It was my debut novel, and it came out January 1st.
And what genre would you call that?
It is historical fiction with strong romantic elements. So if you like a good love story in a historical period, that's what it is.
Okay, and the readings did leave me wondering where the characters are going, what's going to happen, and the witches. Is that historical fiction?
Yes, the interesting thing about that time period with the witches is that there were in the Renaissance era, the Middle Age era, there were tens of thousands of mostly women tortured, burned at the stake for being witches. And if you contrast that with the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1692, there were a total of about 14 women, 5 men, and 2 dogs that were tried as witches. So the the carnage in the Middle Ages was, orders of magnitude worse. And it's not an era that's really been written about. I mean, everybody talks about the Renaissance and the beauty and the art, and that was true, but there was an underlying, misogyny against women that was mostly perpetrated against by monks who just did not like women, and it was terrible. So that's kind of like the setting of this book. So there's a lot of witches.
With the history of that, is it mostly men trying to keep their dominance? Is it religious, where the church is saying we can't have anything outside of our beliefs? Is it government trying to control its population? Is it all of that?
It is all of that. It is all of that. It is also, sometimes women too, that and all you really needed was just saying something, just a little word against somebody, and this could put this poor woman, in jail, on trial. It was if anybody was just a little different, any woman that was just a little bit different, or tried something different outside the church, she had a target on her back. And it was very scary.
So we can see some of that still playing out today in other faiths.
Yes.
Christianity went through its dark ages before the internet, clearly, and now some other faiths are going through that with modern technology, and it's eye-opening. We can see it happening, and we can
Yeah,
say, look, we went through this. Don't do it.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it really is. It was just terrible, and we should not repeat it. But unfortunately, we seem to kind of repeat it over and over. Just it kind of goes through cycles. And obviously, it's not as bad as it was. But if you're the one with a target on your back, it's as bad as it was. You know.
So how much of this comes out in your story as far as how what the evils are, and is there any resolution or enlightenment?
Well, the story is about Celestina, and her goal is to avenge her papa's death. Her papa died trying to save a woman who was accused of being a witch. And in Celestina's young, kind of 17-year-old mind, this woman, killed her papa. So at the beginning, she's a little witch hunter, but by the end, she has a very big change, and she may even become somewhat of a witch savior. So she goes through a very distinct arc, um, and she gets very enlightened. But there's a lot of people that help her along the way and thwart her along the way too.
Well, I hope that besides being very entertaining, and it certainly was that piece that you read, I hope it's also educational for those who don't know much about that time period, and can get something out of it and hopefully benefit the future.
Yes, I believe it is beneficial. In fact, I did a lot of research. In fact, some of the most interesting research I did was there was a professor who actually translated some of these witch trials, these 15th, 14th, and 15th century witch trials, and I myself, when I'm reading them, I could never have come up with the crazy accusations that these people faced. So everything in it, my book is very authentic. If you find it crazy, but believe me, there was something 20 times crazier going on in the next courtroom over there. So yes, it is educational. I think in a really fun, dramatic way. And like I said, there's a really, really good love story. So that's kind of helps.
And refresh my memory, what time period is this?
Well, this is 1491 in Renaissance Florence. So
Okay.
there's
And
so we have walking through are some famous artists, some famous religious figures. So you have all these kind of famous people walking through Celestina's eyes, how she sees them, just sort of a normal baker girl, who's caught up in this.
it's amazing how we had the fine art and and society and culture, and the written word, and we had courts, and what we know today,
Oh yeah.
and yet we had these beliefs that
Yes, because that period in Renaissance Italy, we are very similar now to what they were like then. We borrowed all that Western civilization was from that time. We brought it here. We're very much the same. So it's a slippery slope, all of it, if you ask me. you know.
now tell us about your writing history. Uh, how many books do you have out? Where are you going? Is this going to be a series, that sort of thing?
Well, my writing history is I was a journalist in the Detroit area most of my life. In fact, I was a features editor at the Oakland Press in Pontiac for a while. And then I kind of became a freelance journalist, did a lot of medical writing. And about 10 years ago, I started writing novels. And I had two novels that were very good practice novels that didn't go anywhere until Celestina's Burnings got published. And so right now I'm working on a sequel to Celestina's Burnings. And I'll tell you, the pandemic, it's been a blessing and a curse for me as a writer, because I don't have a darn thing to do. So I'm able to just really, really focus on this next book. It's got a
Well,
lot
that's great.
faster. Yeah.
So I hope that for the readers, for the people that haven't read the book yet, there's some conclusion with this. but yet the story will continue.
Story will continue. Yep, it will continue. Yep.
And can you give us a hint, maybe so that people that have read the book maybe have an idea of where it's going?
Well, the next book takes place under the blood red shadow of the Vatican. So we move from Florence to Rome in the next book. So, and Rome is just as crazy, if not more, as Florence. So we got a lot of stuff going on. And in the next book, there's fortune tellers, there's witches, and there's even dragons. So
Well, dragons.
dragons are awesome.
So a little bit of not so much history in that
Oh,
historical fiction.
we have some very good history in this one too. In fact, I won't tell you who it is, but I found a person, a doctor in history, and there's only been a couple sentences written about this person, but they were they had a kind of a in a bad way a lot of influence on modern day medicine. So through my research, I actually found a very interesting man to kind of put in this book as kind of an evil person.
Now, I would guess the amount of research that you do for any author that has to research something like this kind of book, um, you really get into it. It provides you much more information than you can possibly
Oh,
weave into the story. Is that part of the catalyst for a sequel?
oh yeah, there's just no end to to historical figures and stories that you can kind of weave them into. And the thing is about historical fiction is, we can't really know, what, Pope Innocent the Eighth said, but if you read a lot about him, you can kind of come up with an emotional truth about what he would probably be like. Or someone like Leonardo da Vinci. We don't really know what he would say in this circumstance, but if you read enough about him, you can kind of, figure out that this might be the direction he would be talking in. So I find that really fun, and I really struggle in myself to try to nail it as much as I believe I can to kind of, reflect what they might have been like. So that's kind of how I approach these historical figures.
Oh, wonderful! I'm looking forward to reading your book and reading the sequel, hearing more from you. Could you remind the audience today where to go to find out more information about you, where to maybe purchase your book, and that sort of thing?
Yep, I have a website, Annemarie SchiaviPedersen.com. You can buy my book online everywhere books are sold. Also, the publisher is Literary Wanderlust, a small traditional publisher in Denver, Colorado. They'll be happy to send it to you, but you can get it at Amazon, online, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, everywhere online.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Annemarie Schiavi Pedersen, thank you so much for joining us. And we will have more from the 2020 Authors Fair in a moment.
Thank you, Michael.